Husband told my family to keep quiet around my brother's girlfriend, but mom's birthday had other plans. All right, let me start by saying this isn't the kind of story I ever thought I'd be telling. I always figured my life was pretty normal, you know? Just your regular family drama, nothing too wild. But then this whole thing happened, and now I'm not so sure. So my husband Jake and I have been together for 5 years, married for 2. Jake's the kind of guy who can charm the socks off anyone. My family loves him. My friends think he's great, and honestly, so did I. At least up until recently. We've had our ups and downs like any couple, but I always felt like we were solid, or at least I thought we were. Here's where things start to get tricky. My brother Alex started dating this girl, Sarah, a few months back. She's super nice, friendly, funny, smart, the whole package. My family took to her right away, and honestly, so did I. It felt like she fit right in, like she'd been part of our crew forever. But then one night, Jake and I were sitting on the couch, just watching some random show, when he drops this little nugget of info. Hey, there's something I should probably tell you, he says, all casual-like. Now, if you're in a relationship, you know that sentence is never good. It's right up there with, we need to talk, and can I be honest with you? Anyway, he goes on to tell me that he and Sarah actually dated for a little while before he and I met. My first thought was, okay, no big deal, people have pasts. But then he asked me not to tell Alex or anyone in the family about it. It was a long time ago, he says. I just don't want to make things awkward. Now, I didn't really get why it had to be a secret. I mean, it's not like they were high school sweethearts or something. It was just a short fling. But Jake was pretty insistent, so I figured, whatever, I'll keep it to myself. It wasn't like it mattered, right? Fast forward a few weeks, and everything's fine. Sarah's coming around more, and we're all getting along great. Every time she's over, Jake's totally normal. No weird vibes or anything. Honestly, if he hadn't told me about their history, I wouldn't have guessed they even knew each other before. So I kind of forgot about it. Then one night, we're at dinner with Alex and Sarah starts telling us about some funny stuff from her past. She's talking about this guy she used to date, who was a total clown, always trying to impress her with these ridiculous stunts. Jake's sitting there, cool as a cucumber, like he doesn't have a care in the world. And I'm thinking, wow, he's really not fazed by this. But later, when we get home, Jake's like, yeah, that was a little awkward. I asked him why, and he just shrugged it off, saying he didn't like hearing about Sarah's exes. I found it weird because Jake's usually not the jealous type, but I didn't push it. Maybe he just didn't like being reminded of the past. Now, I gotta say, I'm not the kind of person who likes keeping secrets. It eats at me. So every time I saw Alex and Sarah together, I'd get this little knot in my stomach. I knew I wasn't doing anything wrong, but it still felt weird, like I was holding something back from my own brother. But then I'd remind myself that Jake asked me to keep it quiet, and I'd shove it down. One night, Alex and Sarah came over for dinner. We're all sitting around the table, laughing and talking, and everything's going great. Then Alex steps out to take a call, and it's just me, Jake, and Sarah. That's when Sarah, out of nowhere, says, you know, it's funny running into someone from your past in a totally different context. My heart skipped a beat. I glanced at Jake, and he was staring at his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Yeah, small world, he mumbled, trying to change the subject. Sarah didn't pick up on the tension, thank God, but I could tell Jake was freaking out inside. After they left, I asked him what that was about. I don't know, he said. I just don't want Alex to find out. It'll make things weird between us. I didn't get it. Jake and Alex weren't best friends or anything, but they got along well enough. Why would this little thing from the past be such a big deal? I kept asking him. But he wouldn't give me a straight answer. Just kept saying it was better if we kept it to ourselves. At this point, I started feeling like I was stuck in the middle of something bigger than I realized. Jake was acting off, Sarah was clueless, and I was sitting there with this secret that felt heavier every day. I wanted to come clean, but every time I thought about it, I pictured Jake's face, the way he asked me to keep quiet, and I just couldn't do it. And then came Mom's birthday. But that's a whole other story. For now, let's just say things were about to get a lot more complicated. All right, so Mom's birthday rolls around, and like every year, she wants the whole family together. You know how moms are? Big family dinners, everyone sharing stories, laughing, all that. This year was no different. My brother Alex and his girlfriend Sarah were coming, and of course Jake and I were there. Add a bunch of aunts, uncles, and cousins, and you've got yourself a classic family gathering. Everything started off pretty chill. We showed up, gave Mom her gifts, and everyone was in a good mood. You could smell the food from the driveway. Roast, mashed potatoes, the works. The kitchen was packed, people chatting, Mom rushing around making sure everything was perfect. It felt like one of those wholesome family nights, you know? Jake was doing his usual thing, helping set the table, making small talk with my dad. Sarah was in the kitchen with Mom, laughing about some story. I was trying to soak it all in, but that little voice in the back of my head kept reminding me of the secret. Every time I looked at Jake and Sarah, I got that weird feeling. Like, what if something slips? What if someone says the wrong thing? Anyway, dinner starts and it's great. Everyone's eating, joking around. My uncle starts telling some ridiculous story about the time he got lost on a fishing trip and the whole table's cracking up. For a while, I even forgot about the whole Jake-Sarah thing. Everything was just normal. Then, Mom decides we should go around the table and share funny or memorable stories about her. It's her birthday after all, so why not? Everyone takes turns, sharing cute or funny things from the past. You know the kind. Like the time she burned a whole batch of cookies and blamed it on my dad, or when she tried to fix the TV with a butter knife and nearly electrocuted herself. It's all going smoothly until Alex starts talking. He's telling this sweet story about how Mom helped him through a rough time when he first met Sarah. He's all emotional about it, saying how he wasn't sure about dating again, but Mom encouraged him. Everyone's smiling and Sarah's looking all touched. Then, out of nowhere, Alex says, "Sarah, why don't you tell them about that funny story you always tell me? The one about your ex with the crazy stunts." My stomach dropped. I shot a look at Jake and his face went pale. He knew exactly where this was going. I tried to keep my face neutral, but inside I was screaming. Sarah, oblivious to the storm brewing, starts laughing and says, "Oh yeah, that's a good one." She goes on about this guy she dated who thought he was the next Evil Knievel or something. She's describing all these ridiculous stunts he pulled to impress her, like trying to jump over a pool on a bike, or setting up fireworks in the backyard and almost setting his house on fire. Everyone's laughing, even Jake. But I can see he's forcing it, like he's trying way too hard to act normal. I'm sitting there, gripping my fork, praying she doesn't say his name, but of course, because fate has a twisted sense of humor, she does. "And then Jake," she says, and my heart stops. "He tried to juggle flaming torches at this party, and the whole table goes dead silent. You could hear a pin drop." My mom's halfway through a bite of roast, just frozen. Alex looks confused, and everyone else is staring at Sarah like she just dropped a bomb in the middle of dinner. Jake clears his throat, trying to play it off. "Wow, what a coincidence," he says, laughing nervously. "There's a lot of Jakes out there, huh?" But Alex isn't buying it. He looks from Sarah to Jake, and back to Sarah. "Wait," he says slowly. "You're talking about Jake. Our Jake?" Sarah's face falls as she realizes what she's just said. She stammers, trying to backtrack, but it's too late. The damage is done. Alex turns to Jake, his eyes narrowing. "Is this true?" he asks, his voice low and tense. Jake tries to laugh it off again, but it's not working. "Yeah, but it was a long time ago," he says, waving his hand like it's no big deal. "It didn't mean anything." Alex isn't having it. "You dated my girlfriend and didn't think to tell me?" he snaps. "You both kept this from me?" The tension in the room is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Everyone's looking at Jake and me, waiting to see what happens next. I feel like I'm about to faint. I try to jump in saying, "Alex, it's not like that," but he cuts me off. "Not like what?" he demands. "You knew and didn't say anything? What else are you hiding?" Sarah's sitting there, looking like she wants to disappear. My mom tries to step in saying, "Let's all just calm down, it's Mom's birthday. We don't need this right now." But Alex is too pissed to listen. He grabs his coat, mutters something about needing air, and storms out. Jake and I are left sitting there, surrounded by stunned silence. My mom tries to get the conversation back on track, but the mood's completely ruined. Everyone's awkwardly picking at their food, avoiding eye contact. After a few minutes, Jake leans over to me and whispers, "We should go." I nod, still in a daze, and we quietly make our excuses and leave. On the drive home, we don't say a word to each other. I'm replaying the whole thing in my head, wondering how it all went so wrong. One minute we're having a nice family dinner, and the next, everything's falling apart. And I know this is just the beginning of the mess we're in. After the disaster at Mom's birthday, things were tense. Really tense. Alex didn't talk to me for a while, which honestly hurt more than I thought it would. I mean, he's my brother. We've always had each other's backs, even when we were kids pulling stupid pranks on each other. Now it felt like I'd betrayed him, and that wasn't sitting well with me. Jake, on the other hand, was doing his best to act like nothing happened. "It'll blow over," he kept saying, like Alex just needed some time to cool down. But I knew my brother better than that. This wasn't something he'd just forget. Meanwhile, Sarah was caught in the middle. She reached out a few times, trying to explain that she didn't know Jake was my Jake when they first got together. It wasn't like she was keeping secrets on purpose, but that didn't matter to Alex. To him, it was betrayal. Simple as that. A couple of weeks went by, and things didn't really get any better. Jake and I were still walking on eggshells, and every family gathering was awkward as hell. No one outright said anything, but you could feel it, the elephant in the room that no one wanted to talk about. And then came the night that changed everything. It was a random Wednesday evening. I was home, scrolling through my phone, half watching some trashy reality show, when Jake walked in, looking like he'd seen a ghost. "We need to talk," he said, his voice shaky. Now, if you've been in a relationship, you know that phrase never leads to anything good. My stomach tightened. "What's going on?" I asked, already dreading his answer. Jake sat down on the couch, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to figure out how to start. "I ran into Alex today," he said finally. "At the gym." My heart stopped for a second. "And?" Jake took a deep breath. "He confronted me. Said he's been thinking a lot about what happened. He wanted to know why I didn't come clean from the start." I felt a lump forming in my throat. "What did you say?" "I told him the truth," Jake said, his voice low. "That I didn't want to mess things up between him and Sarah. That it was just a stupid fling that didn't mean anything and I didn't think it was worth bringing up." "And?" I pressed, feeling the tension build. Jake shook his head. "He didn't buy it. Said it's not about what it meant to me, but how it made him feel. He said he felt like a fool, like we were all laughing behind his back." I sighed, leaning back on the couch. "Did you apologize?" "Of course I did," Jake snapped, sounding defensive. "But I don't think it mattered. He's still pissed." That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept going back to that conversation, replaying every word Jake said. I knew Alex. He wasn't just mad, he was hurt. And that's a whole different beast. You can't just apologize and expect everything to go back to normal when someone feels like you've broken their trust. The next day, I decided to call Alex. I knew it was risky, but I couldn't stand the silence anymore. When he picked up, his voice was cold. "What do you want?" "I just want to talk," I said softly. "Can we meet up?" There was a long pause before he finally agreed. We met at this little coffee shop we used to go to all the time. It was weird, sitting across from him, feeling the distance between us. "So," he said, not looking up from his coffee. "What's this about?" "I'm sorry," I started, not sure how to even begin. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I really didn't." Alex finally looked up, his eyes hard. You knew, and you didn't say anything. Do you have any idea how that feels?" I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I do, and I was wrong. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that I just made things worse." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "So why didn't you say something earlier? Why keep it a secret?" "Because Jake asked me to," I admitted. "He didn't want to cause drama. He thought it would make things awkward." Alex snorted. "Well, mission accomplished." There was a heavy silence between us. I could feel the weight of everything left unsaid. "Look," I said finally, "I can't change what happened, but I want to fix this. I don't want to lose you over this." Alex sighed, rubbing his temples. "I don't know, man. This whole thing just feels messed up. I trusted you, both of you, and now I feel like I can't." "I get that," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "but I'm still your sister, and I love you. I want to make this right, whatever it takes." He looked at me for a long time before finally nodding. "All right, but it's going to take time. Don't expect me to just get over it." I nodded, feeling a small glimmer of hope. "That's fair. I just want a chance." After that conversation, things didn't magically get better, but it was a start. Alex was still distant, but at least he was talking to me again. Jake, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. Alex didn't want anything to do with him, which made things pretty awkward whenever we were all in the same room. But I was willing to take small steps if it meant repairing my relationship with my brother. The slip-up at Mom's birthday had caused a mess, but maybe, just maybe, we could find a way through it. All right, so things had been tense for weeks. Alex was still keeping his distance, and every family gathering felt like walking on thin ice. But we all knew the inevitable was coming. You can only sweep so much under the rug before it all explodes, right? Well, that explosion came sooner than I expected. It was a Saturday afternoon, and my mom called to say she wanted everyone over for dinner. Just a casual family thing, nothing fancy. I wasn't thrilled about it, to be honest. The last few dinners had been so awkward, and I wasn't in the mood for more uncomfortable silence. But it was Mom, and saying no wasn't really an option. Jake and I showed up a bit early, helping Mom with the usual stuff, setting the table, chopping veggies, making small talk. Everything felt weirdly normal, like we were all pretending nothing was wrong. Then Alex walked in with Sarah, and you could feel the air shift immediately. He gave a quick nod to Jake, barely acknowledging him, and sat down. Sarah looked between them, clearly sensing the tension but not saying anything. The whole vibe was like one of those bomb squads movies where everyone's trying to defuse the situation without setting anything off. We all sat down to eat, and for a while it was fine. Just the usual chatter about work, life, whatever. But you could tell Alex was sitting on something, like he was just waiting for the right moment to drop it. And then it happened. "So," Alex said, setting his fork down, "we're just gonna keep pretending like everything's cool, huh?" The table went silent. You could hear the clock ticking in the background, that's how quiet it got. Jake shifted in his seat, looking uncomfortable, but didn't say anything. My mom, bless her, tried to lighten the mood. "Alex, let's not ruin dinner. We're here to enjoy each other's company." But Alex wasn't letting it go. "No, Mom, we're not just gonna brush this under the rug. Jake and I need to have a talk, right now." Jake sighed, clearly not in the mood for a confrontation. "Alex, can we not do this here? It's Mom's dinner." Alex leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Oh, now you care about what's appropriate? Funny how that works." I tried to step in. "Alex, come on, let's not do this here." But he wasn't listening. He was laser-focused on Jake. "You lied to me," he said, his voice low but full of anger. "You lied and you made her lie too." Jake finally looked up, meeting Alex's gaze. "I didn't lie, I just didn't tell you." Alex scoffed. "That's the same thing. You knew it would screw things up between us, so you kept it quiet. That's not what family does." Jake clenched his jaw. "I didn't want to hurt you, Alex. It wasn't about keeping secrets. It was about keeping the peace." Alex shook his head. "You don't get to decide what I need to know. That's not your call. You should have been honest from the start." Jake tried to defend himself, but Alex wasn't letting him off the hook. "And you," he said, turning to me. "You're my sister. You should have told me, no matter what he said. How could you sit there and pretend like everything was fine?" I felt like I was shrinking under his gaze. "I thought I was protecting you," I said quietly. "I didn't want to make things harder." Alex's face softened for a moment, but then he shook his head again. "You weren't protecting me. You were protecting him." The room was dead silent. Even Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. My mom was the only one who tried to bring some sense back to the table. "Alex, please, let's not turn this into a shouting match. We're family." Alex stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Family doesn't keep secrets like this, Mom. Family doesn't betray each other." Jake stood up too, his hands on the table. "I didn't betray you, Alex. I made a mistake. I should have told you, but I didn't. I'm sorry. What else do you want me to say?" Alex glared at him. "I want you to own up to the fact that you were selfish. You didn't keep quiet for me. You did it for yourself." Jake opened his mouth to respond, but then closed it, realizing Alex was right. He sat back down, looking defeated. "You're right," he admitted. "I was selfish. I didn't want to deal with the fallout, so I thought keeping it quiet was easier. I'm sorry." Alex stood there for a moment, then shook his head. "Sorry doesn't cut it, man. Not this time." He grabbed his coat and turned to Sarah. "Let's go." Sarah hesitated for a second, glancing at me like she wanted to say something, but then she followed Alex out the door. The sound of it closing behind them felt like the final nail in the coffin. Jake and I sat there, not saying a word. Mom sighed, rubbing her temples. "Well, that went well." I didn't know what to say. The confrontation we'd been dreading had finally happened, and it didn't fix anything. If anything, it made the rift between us even bigger. And now all I could think was, where do we go from here? After Alex stormed out that night, things felt different, like permanently different. You know when you have those moments where you realize life isn't going back to how it was? Yeah, that's exactly where we were. Jake and I drove home in silence. I kept staring out the window, trying to process everything. My brain was buzzing with all the things I wanted to say but didn't know how. Jake looked tense, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding him together. I wanted to ask if he was okay, but honestly, I wasn't sure I even wanted to hear his answer. When we finally got home, Jake collapsed on the couch, running his hands through his hair. "Well, that was a disaster," he muttered. I sat down next to him, feeling the weight of everything that had just happened. "Yeah," I agreed quietly. "It was." Jake leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "I really screwed up, didn't I?" I didn't answer right away. I was still too angry, too hurt. "You should have told him," I said finally. "From the start." "I know," he admitted. "I just didn't think it would blow up like this." I shook my head. "You didn't think about how it would affect anyone else. You just wanted to avoid the drama. But now, look where we are." He sighed, closing his eyes. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't want to hurt him." "Well, you did," I said bluntly, "and now I don't know if we can fix this." For the next few days, things were tense between us. Jake was quieter than usual, and I kept replaying that night over and over in my head. Every time I thought about Alex's face, the anger and disappointment, it felt like a punch to the gut. I tried texting Alex a couple of times, but he didn't respond. Sarah, on the other hand, did. She sent me a long message apologizing for how everything went down. She said she didn't know what to do, that she felt caught in the middle. I didn't blame her. None of this was her fault, but it still hurt to see how much this whole thing was messing with everyone. A week went by, and I hadn't heard from Alex. My mom kept trying to smooth things over, telling me to give him time, but it wasn't helping. I hated the silence, the not knowing where we stood. Then one afternoon I got a call from Alex. I almost didn't answer, thinking it might just be another awkward conversation, but something told me to pick up. "Hey," he said, his voice tired. "Hey," I replied, unsure of where this was going. There was a long pause before he finally spoke again. "I've been thinking a lot." "Yeah?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Yeah," he said. "Look, I'm still pissed. I don't know if I can ever really get past this, but I don't want to lose you." I swallowed hard. "I don't want to lose you either." Another pause. "Jake still hasn't reached out," he said flatly. I sighed. "He's trying to give you space. He doesn't want to make things worse." Alex let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, well, he's got that covered." I didn't know what to say to that. He wasn't wrong, but hearing it like that hurt. "What do you want me to do?" I asked softly. "I don't know," Alex admitted. I need time. I'm not ready to pretend everything's okay, but I don't want to shut you out either." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I get it. Take all the time you need." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, just staring at my phone. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was something. A small step towards maybe, someday, patching things up. Jake came into the room looking at me expectantly. "Was that Alex?" "Yeah," I said. "He's still mad, but he doesn't want to cut me off." Jake nodded, sitting down next to me. "That's something, at least." "Yeah," I agreed, though it didn't feel like much of a victory. Over the next few weeks, things slowly started to thaw. Alex still wasn't talking to Jake, but he'd text me every now and then. We weren't back to normal, but we were finding our way to something better. Sarah was doing her best to keep things calm between us, but I knew it wasn't easy for her either. Jake eventually reached out to Alex, but it didn't go well. Alex wasn't ready to forgive him, and honestly, I couldn't blame him. Trust is hard to rebuild once it's broken. Thanksgiving came around, and it was the first time in a long while that we were all in the same room again. It was awkward at first. No one really knew what to say or how to act. But as the night went on, things got a little easier. We were all making an effort, even if it was just baby steps. By the end of the night, Alex and Jake still hadn't talked much, but at least they weren't outright ignoring each other. It was a start, and sometimes that's all you can hope for. The aftermath of that night at Mom's birthday wasn't easy to deal with. It changed things in a way that we couldn't ignore. But slowly, we were figuring it out. Piece by piece, we were trying to put our family back together. And maybe, someday, things would be okay again. Update 1. I thought things were finally starting to settle down. Alex and I were slowly rebuilding our relationship, and while he was still distant from Jake, I figured time would help. But of course, life had other plans. It all started with a phone call from Alex. I wasn't expecting it, so when his name popped up on my screen, I was both surprised and relieved. Maybe we were finally getting somewhere. "Hey," I answered, trying to sound casual. "Can you come over?" Alex's voice was tense, almost shaky. "I need to talk to you. It's important." Immediately, my stomach tightened. "Sure, everything okay?" "Just come over," he said, and then hung up. I didn't waste any time. Something in his voice told me this wasn't going to be a normal chat. When I got to his place, he was pacing in the living room, looking more stressed than I'd ever seen him. "What's going on?" I asked, closing the door behind me. Alex didn't say anything at first. He just handed me Sarah's phone. "Look at this," he said, his voice tight with anger. I hesitated. "Why do you have her phone?" "I found it," he said quickly. "She left it out, and I couldn't help myself. I needed to know." "Know what?" I asked, my heart pounding. He didn't answer. Instead, he gestured for me to look at the screen. I opened the photo gallery, and that's when I saw them. Pictures of Jake and Sarah together. And not just casual ones. These were clearly from when they were dating. There were selfies of them at the beach, at parties, even one of them cuddled up on a couch. I felt sick. "These could be old," I said, trying to convince myself more than him. "Keep scrolling," Alex said, his jaw clenched. I did, and that's when I saw the messages. Sarah had been texting her friends about Jake. And not just reminiscing. She was talking about how being with Alex was her way of staying close to Jake. One message stood out. I know it's weird, but being with Alex keeps Jake in my life. I still have feelings for him, and this is the only way I can handle it. I couldn't believe what I was reading. She's using you, I whispered, feeling the anger rise in my chest. Alex nodded. Yeah, and she's been lying to both of us. I sat down, trying to process everything. How long have you known? Just found out today, Alex admitted, sitting across from me. She left her phone on the counter and I couldn't resist. I had a feeling something was off, but this is worse than I thought. We sat in silence for a minute, both trying to wrap our heads around what this meant. Alex looked more hurt than angry now, and I didn't know what to say to make it better. What are you going to do? I asked finally. I don't know, Alex said, running a hand through his hair. I can't be with someone who's only with me to get close to someone else, but I don't know how to confront her without losing my mind. I'll talk to Jake, I offered. He needs to know about this too. Alex shook his head. No, not yet. I want to handle Sarah first. I need to hear her say it. I nodded, understanding his need for closure. Just be careful, okay? Don't let her twist this around on you. He gave me a small, bitter smile. Don't worry. I'm done being played. We talked a bit more about how he might approach Sarah, but there wasn't much left to say. The damage was done, and now it was just about picking up the pieces. On my way home, I couldn't stop thinking about everything. Sarah, Jake, the lies. It was like a never-ending nightmare. I felt betrayed, not just for Alex, but for myself too. How could I have been so blind to all of this? How could Jake? When I got home, Jake was there, sitting on the couch, flipping through channels like nothing was wrong. I didn't say anything at first, just stood there watching him, wondering how much of this he already knew. Hey, he said, looking up at me. Everything okay? I didn't answer right away. I needed to be sure before I started anything. Can we talk? Jake raised an eyebrow. Sure, what's up? I sat down next to him, taking a deep breath. Alex found something out today, about Sarah. His face immediately darkened. What about her? I hesitated, not sure how to word it. She's been keeping pictures of you two, from when you were together. And she's been texting her friends about how being with Alex is her way of staying close to you. Jake stared at me, stunned. What? Are you serious? I nodded. He showed me the messages. She admitted it, Jake. She's using Alex to stay close to you. Jake shook his head, looking genuinely shocked. I had no idea. I swear I didn't know. I searched his face, trying to see if he was lying, but he looked as confused and upset as I felt. Why didn't she just come to me? He asked, more to himself than to me. Why drag Alex into this? Because she's selfish, I said bluntly. She didn't care about who she hurt as long as she got what she wanted. Jake ran a hand over his face, looking exhausted. I need to talk to her. No, I said quickly. Let Alex handle it. He needs to do this his way. We'll deal with the fallout after. Jake nodded reluctantly. All right. But after he talks to her, I'm going to have my own conversation with her. Fair, I said, though I wasn't looking forward to that at all. The rest of the night was quiet, both of us lost in our own thoughts. I didn't know what the next few days would bring, but one thing was certain. This was far from over. Update 2. The next day, Alex called me. His voice was sharp, like he was barely holding it together. I'm talking to her tonight, he said. I need to hear it from her mouth. Are you sure? I asked. Do you want me to be there? No, he said firmly. I need to do this alone. I didn't argue. This was his battle, and I knew he needed to face Sarah on his terms. But that didn't stop me from worrying. I spent the whole day on edge, wondering how it would go down. By evening, I was practically glued to my phone, waiting for Alex to call. Around 9 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was Alex. I answered immediately. Hey, how did it go? I'll tell you later, he said, his voice strained. I need some time. And just like that, he hung up. I sat there, heart pounding, wondering what the hell happened. The next morning, Alex finally called again. You've got time to talk now? He asked, his voice calmer but still heavy with emotion. Yeah, I said quickly. What happened? He sighed. She came over last night. I told her we needed to talk, and she looked nervous right away, like she knew what was coming. What did you say? I pressed. I asked her straight up about the pictures and the messages, he said. At first she tried to deny it, said I must have misunderstood, but when I showed her the screenshots, she couldn't lie anymore. I could practically hear the tension in his voice. And then? She broke down, Alex continued, started crying, saying she didn't mean to hurt me, that she still had feelings for Jake but didn't know how to deal with them. I clenched my jaw. Unbelievable. Yeah, Alex agreed bitterly. She admitted to everything, said she was dating me because it was easier than confronting her feelings for Jake, like I was some kind of consolation prize. My heart ached for him. Alex, I'm so sorry. He sighed again. I kicked her out, told her I couldn't do this anymore. I can't be with someone who's not fully in it, you know? I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. You did the right thing. I know, he said quietly, but it still hurts. I really liked her, thought we had something real. I know, I said, my voice soft, but you deserve better than that. Someone who's all in. Yeah, he said, though he didn't sound convinced. I just need some time to figure things out. We talked a bit more, mostly about how he was feeling and what he was going to do next. By the end of the call, I could tell he was still hurting, but at least he wasn't holding it all in anymore. After we hung up, I couldn't stop thinking about everything Alex had been through. He'd been betrayed by someone he trusted, and it wasn't just Sarah. It was Jake, too. Even though Jake didn't actively do anything wrong, his presence had been enough to cause all this pain. I knew things were far from over, but at least now the truth was out in the open. And maybe, just maybe, we could all start moving forward.